Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into something a little different. A special episode all about creepy Japanese let's not meet stories. You know, those real-life encounters that make you want to look over your shoulder twice. If you love getting spooked by tales from across the world, you're in the right place. Also, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe then. Comment below and tell me what kind of stories you want to hear next. I'm always down to cover whatever you're curious about. And with that, here's the first story. Story number 1. I was in Japan. So recently I went on a trip with my family to Japan. Overall, I really enjoyed myself and thought it was a beautiful country, but one thing happened to me that kind of puts me off. I had recently got out of hospital before we went on the trip, recently meaning 2 days out of hospital. I got my appendix removed and blood sucked out of my stomach, so as you can probably imagine I was not in the best shape and very sore and incredibly ducking tired. My family had decided they would go out and explore a temple, but I stayed back in the hotel because I was in too much pain and needed to rest. About 2-ish hours after my family had left, I decided I was hungry. Seeing a 7-Eleven out my hotel window, I decided to go and get something to eat because it wasn't too much of a walk and there was no room service or anything. So I set off on my small journey to get some food. After buying some kebab things and a strange cake, I went to the small seating area to sit and eat because I was too tired to walk back yet. It was just me and an older Japanese man sitting behind me. I felt someone touching my hair. I turned around. He started trying to tell me how beautiful my hair was, but his English was terrible, so I just smiled and said thank you. This was not uncommon as I have strawberry blonde hair and a lot of people in Japan seem to be fascinated with it. People always came up and touched it. I got back to eating, but soon after the man moved next to me and started trying to talk to me again. To be completely honest, I sort of felt obliged to try and communicate because he seemed so cute and old and innocent. The first just wanted to be nice. Bad idea. Shortly after he decided to take a seat next to me, he starts saying short phrases in English. Incredibly sexual short phrases. His English seemed to have gotten better. He continued to ask me for sex and tell me I was beautiful, and I was very uncomfortable at this point and got up and left the 7-Eleven. At this point he decided it would be a really cool and fun idea to come outside with me. I was so tired and needed more pain medication, so at this point I just couldn't deal with his shot. I wanted to go back to the hotel and nap. I turned around and began cursing and telling him to leave me alone now. All of a sudden he got this very angry look on his face and actually spat on me. I was so furious at this point that I turned around, ignored the pain in my stomach, and walked home so angrily I probably looked like a cartoon character. So, although this is not as creepy as some of the other stories here, this freaky old guy is definitely someone I would prefer not to meet again. Story number 2. When I lived in Japan, my neighbor really did not like me. I lived in Japan for around 10 months a couple years back as part of a study abroad program as my placement year for university. I lived in Hiroshima, and pretty much every Japanese person I met was exactly how you would expect them. Generous and respectful. All except this one old lady who just so happened to live in the apartment next to me. It was about a month after I'd been in Japan, originally from Northern Ireland, so it was quite an adjustment to make, when our group of gaijins, or foreigners, decided we were going to go to the Seijo Sake Festival or Seijo Rice Wine Festival. For those who don't know, this is a huge rice wine drinking festival that, from what I now understand, everyone goes and gets extremely drunk at. As men of fine taste and culture, We sampled many different kinds of sake from all over Japan and got rode off beyond belief. Then we all got the train home back to our apartments. I can't remember shot all apart from calling my GF at the time and passing out on my futon. Normal stuff. Skip to 6 a.m. the next morning when my loud as duck doorbell wakens me up. Keep in mind my apartment is extremely small, so the noise is extremely loud. I check the time and am confused as anything but assume it's just my friend from downstairs who wants to talk about last night. I look through the peephole in my door and see a police officer standing there. First thought that goes through my mind is, Taylor, what the hell have you done when you were drunk last night? But at the same time I was so sure I just fell asleep right away. I talked to the dude using a translation app and he basically tells me there's been a noise complaint. Strange considering the fact all I did was make a phone call and fall asleep. Anyway, the guy sees how confused I am and kinda just sees there must have been a mistake, leaves. I'm honestly still drunk and just super confused, but the day carries on as normal. Next morning, 6 a.m., doorbell rings. I already kind of assumed what it was going to be this time, and what do I see through the peephole this time? 2 police officers. Same convo goes down and I convince them that there's been no noise. I literally walk them into my apartment to show them how I fell asleep watching Netflix. They tell me at this point it's the neighbor, who I've never met, is making the complaints. At this point I think she's just a bitch or maybe racist. I asked the guy at my uni who takes care of all the foreign students about this, and he tells me that I'm getting moved apartments to a room on the floor below. I'm pretty pissed because I just settled into my new space, but whatever. He plans on coming tomorrow morning with the landlord to move my shit out and check my new room is okay. Ever get it when you get woken up by something in the middle of the night and it really fucks you up? I went to sleep on good time that night in prep for the people helping move my stuff out. So naturally at 3 a.m. I'm fast asleep. Then suddenly... Story number 3. Creepy guy in Japan. This happened when I was a lot younger and sometimes I still think about it, so I decided to write about it. At the time this happened, I was 10 years old, going to a school in Osaka, Japan. I lived in America, but every summer my mom would take my younger sisters and I to Japan to see her mother and make us go to school since Japanese schools go on until late July before their summer break. In the mornings, I would walk to school with my sisters and everything was usually okay, although we'd get the occasional odd stare since, despite still being half Japanese in a small town like that, where no tourists ever came, we stuck out like a sore thumb. However, once school was over I usually was unable to walk home with my sisters because of after-school clubs and the clubs ending at different times. At least I had a few friends who could walk me home, however, and give me some company. So, I rarely ever was alone. One day, I decided I didn't want to stay for my club and that I just wanted to go home early and play some Wii. I knew my mom wouldn't mind since I had decided to join a not too important club, which was the cooking club. My friends, however, had more obligations than I did since they actually lived in Japan and went to the school year-round unlike me and could not accompany me home. My walk home started out fine, but rather quickly my 10-year-old self felt something was off. There was a man with a baseball cap, wearing one of those cold masks, which isn't honestly that uncommon in Japan, with baggy clothing following me. He was still a fair distance away from me too, so since I was a pretty naive kid, I shrugged it off and kept walking. But pretty soon after I heard footsteps pretty close behind me now. I figured it was a different person, but being curious, I turned my head to see the same man, closing the distance between us fairly quickly. I remember starting to feel pretty nervous at that point. A quick point here before I continue. In the town I was at, there's lots of small alleys and streets that are all connected, so you can take plenty of wrong turns and still end up home as long as you have a decent idea as to where your house is. My brain doesn't function well at all when I'm nervous or stressed, so instinctively, I turned into a small alleyway, which was honestly the most dumb thing I could have done. But at the time, I figured that the man would keep walking and that would resolve all of this. But instead, he turned into the alleyway as well. At this point, I started fast walking. I didn't want to straight up run since I still wasn't 100% sure he was following me, and running would come off as kind of rude if the man wasn't following me. I began making random turns into streets and narrow alleys that I had never stepped foot into before, hoping that the man wouldn't follow me. Surely he was just an innocent man trying to get somewhere? However, even my dumb 10-year-old brain knew that after the 5th or 6th time I had made a random turn, with the man still following me, that I was in danger. At the time, I was in a narrow alleyway with walls that were way taller than I was. So I couldn't see what was up ahead or next to me. I decided I should start running, not thinking that a grown man would be faster than me. Again, I was a dumb kid. Also, I was weighed down by my backpack and water bottle, so I can only imagine how slow I was. I could hear his footsteps much louder against the asphalt, and I was beyond scared shitless at this point. I was sure I was going to get kidnapped and then murdered. I remember running with everything I had, to the point I was afraid I'd literally run myself into the ground. I was way too terrified to even cry or scream. But the alleyway went out into a street I recognized where there was a supermarket, and thankfully, there were several people either walking or on their bicycles. I slowed down immediately. I was a self-conscious kid, and I didn't want to attract more attention to myself than my foreign looks already were. I turned around once more to see the man who was simply standing there for a few moments before walking in the direction of the supermarket. But I knew there was no way that was destination this whole time. I had taken the weirdest route, and there were much easier ways that he could have used if he wanted to go to the supermarket. I remember telling my mom, who then contacted my school. I got in some trouble for deciding to go home alone that day, and afterwards, a teacher always made sure there was at least one kid with me when I went home. I began making random turns into streets and narrow alleys that I had never stepped foot into before, hoping that the man wouldn't follow me. Surely he was just an innocent man trying to get somewhere? However, even my dumb 10-year-old brain knew that after the 5th or 6th time I had made a random turn, with the man still following me, that I was in danger. At the time, I was in a narrow alleyway with walls that were way taller than I was. So I couldn't see what was up ahead or next to me. I decided I should start running, not thinking that a grown man would be faster than me. Again, I was a dumb kid. Also, I was weighed down by my backpack and water bottle, so I can only imagine how slow I was. I could hear his footsteps much louder against the asphalt, and I was beyond scared shitless at this point. I was sure I was going to get kidnapped and then murdered. I remember running with everything I had, to the point I was afraid I'd literally run myself into the ground. I was way too terrified to even cry or scream. But the alleyway went out into a street I recognized where there was a supermarket, and thankfully, there were several people either walking or on their bicycles. I slowed down immediately. I was a self-conscious kid, and I didn't want to attract more attention to myself than my foreign looks already were. I turned around once more to see the man who was simply standing there for a few moments before walking in the direction of the supermarket. But I knew there was no way that was destination this whole time. I had taken the weirdest route, and there were much easier ways that he could have used if he wanted to go to the supermarket. I remember telling my mom, who then contacted my school. I got in some trouble for deciding to go home alone that day, and afterwards, a teacher always made sure there was at least one kid with me when I went home.